Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for our session, What a Winning Analytics Team Looks Like, Acts Like, and Does, with our special guest, Professor Kevin Hartman, Chief Analytics Evangelist at Google and Adjunct Professor at Gies College of Business, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. My name is Alexander. I'm a part of the higher education team here at Ivy Exec, and I will be helping to moderate today's session. Before we begin, I have a few brief housekeeping items for our audience. First, all attendees are in listen-only mode. However, we encourage you to engage in the session by asking questions, which you can do using the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Please make sure to use this feature for all the questions you may have for the presenter, while we invite you to use the in-chat feature for sharing any thoughts you may have with the rest of the audience. We'll be having a formal Q&A session, so please feel free to send in your questions throughout the session. Additionally, we're recording today's session, so you can look forward to receiving a copy of the recording via email in the coming days. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Kate Deering, Coordinator, Recruitment and Admissions for Gies Online Programs. Kate?
Thanks, Alexander, and welcome everyone to our Ivy Exec webinar today. As Alexander said, my name is Kate Deering. I'm a coordinator for recruitment and admissions here at Gies Online Programs, and I am really looking forward to spending the next hour or so with you and Adjunct Professor Kevin Hartman. I wanted to give you just a brief overview of what Gies Business is all about. We offer 3 online master's degree programs, the IMBA in Business Administration, the IMSA, which is a master's in accountancy, and the IMSM, a master's of science in management, as well as 3 brand new graduate certificates in strategic leadership and management, accounting analytics, and digital marketing. Gies graduate level programs are very innovative, they're affordable, and they are designed to be specifically online to offer a real flexibility in access for full-time working professionals. Today, you will experience a webinar from one of our talented instructors and be able to get a glimpse into what kind of content and research is happening within Gies. Our courses balance foundational material that's shared on the Coursera platform with an interactive high engagement component from Illinois as well. The high engagement component includes a live class each week and many other facets to learning like group projects. There's office hours where you can meet with the faculty members, networking, and also just being part of a great university like Illinois. If you'd like to learn more, I will add a QR code link and our email in the chat here in just a minute. I'm very excited for our presentation today. In this session, Professor Hartman will break down key principles that businesses can use to realize the potential of a tech-savvy analytics team while casting a keen eye towards the cultural considerations that are embraced by companies where analysts thrive. As Google's Chief Analytics Evangelist, Kevin Hartman is responsible for leading the design, implementation, and evolution of programs and approaches that help businesses around the world realize the opportunities presented by data. Professor Hartman has a proven track record of building large, global, high-functioning analytics organizations from scratch and deep experience in leading large profit and loss centers and cross-functional teams, identifying business opportunities, and also creating effective marketing programs. In addition to his role at Google, Kevin teaches graduate level courses in analytics at the University of Notre Dame, the University of Chicago, Northeastern University, and the University of Illinois, where he teaches digital marketing analytics and intro to business analytics, communicating with data. Kevin Hartman is the author of Digital Marketing Analytics in Theory and in Practice as well. Excuse me. I'm very excited to turn the presentation over now to Professor Kevin Hartman.
Thank you very much, Kate. You're fine. Really happy to be here with all of you and looking forward to this. Analytics is clearly something that I enjoy quite a bit. It's something that I have invested in quite a bit with my time and efforts, and it's just something that I absolutely love. And one of the things that I love, particularly when I'm talking about analytics, is the analytics team, right? Analytics as a function is something that is so tremendously important to every organization. And it's a terrible shame and waste when I come upon an organization that just isn't doing it correctly, to no fault of their own, really. I mean, this is hard to do, for sure. But when you have a high functioning, high performing analytics team, it always, in my experience, makes the organization better. So what I want to talk about is just some of those challenges, for sure, but also just what it looks like, how it's done right. And we'll talk a little bit about what it does look like, how it's organized structurally, talk about how it acts, what the culture is, what a high-performing team really behaves like, and then finally what it actually does. Some of those ideas that analytics can help an organization either realize through opportunities, defeat in terms of challenges it faces, and so how that power can really be harnessed. I want to begin here. This is the kind of the state of the world today. Digital transformation, this idea of having functioning, high-performing organizations in a modern day is something that is absolutely at the top of every C-suite's agenda. How do we use data better? How do we use technology, right? What Boston Consulting Group has come to recognize through a series of audits and stakeholder interviews, all the things that consultants do so well, is that there are really 4 levels of organizations, 4 categories, if you will, of digital maturity. Those range from the nascent organizations, those that are just sort of getting together what they can do with data, starting to use a little bit of data, testing, kind of learning, all the way through to what the Boston Consulting Group calls multi-moment. These are organizations who have the people, processes, and technologies in place to use data in the right way, make their company more efficient and effective. And they really, at every step of this maturity scale, these organizations improve, and they improve in a couple ways. What BCG has found is that as organizations evolve, each step they achieve gets them greater top-line growth, more revenue, and greater efficiency, profitability, cost reductions. So there are great incentives for organizations to really invest in modern ways of working, becoming more digitally savvy and mature. And yet, the challenges that I talked about are real. What BCG has found is that fewer than 1 in 10 companies, less than 10%, 9% to be exact, have realized that power of data. Most of them are somewhere in the middle. And this is not particularly surprising when you understand how organizations function. There are silos of people and data that are difficult to connect. There are investment challenges. There are leadership concerns, right? And so even though organizations that become more digitally enabled and mature see great benefit, not many of them are doing it. At the heart of that is the analytics team. And what we'll talk about today is the challenge that organizations face in harnessing digital data is really one of leadership. It's not a technological one. It's not investing in new tools. It's not buying new systems. It is developing a high-performing analytics team. And what that means is what we'll talk about today in terms of what that team looks like, what it does, and how it brings benefit to the organization. All of this that we'll talk about too is completely accessible and achievable by any organization. It just takes the right investment. It takes the right culture. And again, those are leadership challenges. To level set one step more, I want to make sure that when we're talking about an analyst, what are we talking about? And really, what we're talking about is someone who embodies 3 functional roles. All of you all, but whether you are that analyst with hands on a keyboard doing analysis, whether you are managing a team of analysts, whether you are just someone who is a customer of analysts, you need to recognize what the analyst is, what they should be doing, and certainly what they shouldn't be doing. There are 3 functional roles that analyst plays, and the good ones play all of these equally well. There is the role of a data strategist, meaning that analyst can link the data world to the business world, right? They understand what performance looks like, good and bad. They understand how different measures and metrics can become signals for business performance, for customer understanding, for all those things that are important to an organization. That is earned, frankly, just through experience. And what that really requires is broad experience. Frankly, in my career, the best analysts that I have worked with came from outside of the analyst world. They were salespeople. They were playing some other role, because once they bring that experience into the analytics side, they can start to understand the data in a different way. And so this takes this broader, call it empathy, for the rest of the organization. The second role the analyst plays is that of the techie. This is the hard skill. This is the stuff that we probably typically think of when we think of the analyst, right? That person who has computer skills, who knows how to collect data, manage data, analyze data. These things are just learned, right? These are certificates. This is investing in building skill in publicly available tools like SQL and R and Python, mastering spreadsheets, right? And all the wonderful things that those do for analysts. As well as the tools that the organization is investing in. So this is just hard skill that anyone can build. The third important function that the analyst plays is that of a communicator. It's what we'll call data designer. It means that they can communicate insight, they can tell stories from data. This requires certainly some communication skill, but as we see in my class, Communicating with Data, it is much more. It is understanding how an audience, how a human interprets a visual. It is using that to our advantage to communicate efficiently and effectively, using things that we call visual cues and attributes. So there is some learned skill there for sure, as no one is really born with these sort of ability, right, to communicate with data. It's something that you can develop when you're taught the correct way. So these 3 functional roles are who the analyst is, and analysts that do this well, as I said, really balance all of them. They recognize that they're all complementary. If they are good in 2 of the areas but not in one, their ability as an analyst will be stifled. Right? Analysts really are when they're doing this right, balance these 3 functional roles and are able to do all of it. So that's who we're talking about. Let's move into how we now bring those sorts of analysts to the organization and what they do. What this team looks like, even though there are possibly thousands, hundreds of ways that analyst teams can be organized, we really find 3 models that work well. They all work. They all have their pros and cons. What it gets down to is how the organization really values the pros and the cons of the model, and until it finds one that really fits with it. As I said, there are 3 different models. This idea of being a centralized analytics team, a decentralized analytics team, and then one that we'll call a hybrid model, a centralized decentralization model. The centralized model places the analytics team at the center of the organization. It serves the entire set of business lines, of functions, right? This model works really well when you have an organization that is very focused, because that analytics team at the center is close to all of those teams that would require help. They are very close to the business challenges that those teams face. They are accessible. Everyone knows where they are. The problem with a model like this, the downside, is that it doesn't scale particularly well. As the requests start to pile up, as the diversity of requests and asks of that team grows, this team tends to break. Worse than breaking, you see these teams often revert to simply developing a menu of services that they'll deliver. And that's a terrible thing for any analytics team to do. The power of an analytics team is in solving bespoke challenges with bespoke solutions. And if you are just saying, these are the 5 things we'll do, then you rob the organization of those sorts of bespoke solutions. And so while this team can be really good when the organization is focused and on somewhat of the small operation side, as soon as the organization starts to get bigger and there's more diversity in the challenges, this becomes a somewhat untenable model. That's where the second model comes in. This is what we'll call decentralization. This is where there is an analytics team placed against each of the lines of business, delivering directly for them. You get those bespoke solutions. You can move resource across these teams depending on which line of business has greater needs, right? And this model will work very well for that diverse organization in developing solutions that fit their particular needs, right? The downside to an organization like this, unfortunately, is that it becomes really difficult to share. You wind up reinventing the wheel quite a bit. No matter how much you intend to commit to lunch and learns and newsletters and all of those tactics that we might use to try to bring analysts together and have them share their ideas and learn from one another, it just doesn't work. These teams are running a million miles an hour in their own direction with their hair on fire. I've done it, right? And it becomes really difficult to pull them back, have them have empathy for each other's needs and the solutions, the situations that they are working in. And so sharing becomes a real challenge for this team in this model. And that is where the hybrid model really comes in. This has a set of analytics teams aligned against each of the lines of business, just like the decentralization model. The thing that makes it different is that there is a management structure placed over it, whose sole job is in ensuring culture, ensuring best practices, and sharing and uniting that organization. This is how Google does it. Not to say that we're doing it right. We actually started in the centralized role, and then we skipped over the decentralized altogether and hopped right to this hybrid model. The pros are that you get that bespoke solution, but you are able to better share across the different groups, right? And scale solutions. Culture is intact and consistent across the teams. The downside is that it's very expensive. You know, it's hard enough to, I think, to invest the kind of money that is required to build bespoke decentralized analytics teams. To add a management layer over that, where you're looking to bring in analytics professionals who have management skill as well, can be quite costly. But depending on the needs for the organization, this can be the right model. When efficiency is of utmost importance, then this delivers against that objective quite well, right? So there are 3 different models. All of them work. It just depends on what the needs of the organization is and how that organization will assess the pros and the cons of each model. From there comes the real challenge. Once you get your model in place, It's building that culture, the activities, right, that make the analytics team a high-performing one. And there are really a few very, very important learnings that I've taken away in my lifetime in running analytics teams, both small and large, in the way you do this right. I've had the good fortune of building several analytics teams from scratch. I've made every mistake in the book. I've learned so much. And these are sort of my condensed ideas into what makes for a good team. The first is around where you invest. And the idea is that when it comes to analytics, we invest in talent, not tools. We have a guideline that we call the 10-90 rule. What it says is that every dollar we put into analytics, 90 cents goes to a human, and securing them, 10 cents goes to tools. Look, at Google, we are awash with data, tremendous volumes of data. The tools we use to analyze those data, SQL, R, Python, free, open source. We visualize in Tableau and in our own data studio. We use Google Sheets and the online Google Docs suite. We don't invest in big hulking tools to help our analysts move data around. We don't need to. We use the same tools that any student would use. And it's primarily because there is so much good open source tools available to analysts that we don't need anything more. And you shouldn't. No organization does. Where we wind up putting our investment is in the analysts. We recognize that it is the analyst that produces insights for our organization. It is the analyst who can interpret the data, play those three functional roles that I talked about, who is vitally important and the key to unlocking the insights and the value from data, not tools. Right. So I am old enough to remember when every organization was moving toward huge, massive, hulking data systems and warehouses, and we just now see very little need for that. Sure, you need to organize your data. Sure, you need to be able to pull in both first party, those data that you're collecting directly, all the way to third party, those data that are you purchase from others. But when it comes to making sense of those data, it's not tools that you need. It's analysts. My advice for any organization, it doesn't matter who they are, is hire an analyst. And if you already have an analyst, hire another analyst. And so that is really the guideline that we live by in this idea of investing in talent over tools. The next consideration is the idea that we recognize how important the culture is for our analytics team. What we reward is curiosity. We want analysts who ask the best questions, not those who know the most. That's because we recognize the pursuit of analytics is a constant, ongoing one. This is not a sport where you take on an analytics challenge and you are looking to cross the finish line or wind up in the end zone and spike the ball and you're done. A good analytics project for us will open up at its end another 10 questions that we can go off and pursue. That's how analytics works. It is a constant evolving set of gaining understanding so that we can ask better questions and go out and refine our analysis. And to do that, we need analysts who thrive in ambiguity and love to be curious, right? And so any organization that is building the analytics team that will be high performing needs to place a premium on curiosity. The third and very, very important consideration is the way that analyst teams work with what I'll call analyst adjacent leaders, or those customers of analysts, not analysts themselves, right? These are business leaders who are receiving work from the analysts. And the way this relationship works is when that analyst adjacent leader comes to the analyst and says, here's the problem I'm looking to solve. This is the business challenge that I have. How can you help me? Right? And then the analyst will use their expertise to say, well, here's how data could provide some insight for you. Right? In that way, both roles are doing what they do best. The non-analyst is diagnosing the business challenge, identifying the question that they need answered, maybe bringing a hypothesis for sure, but they are diagnosing that challenge. The analyst is solving it with data. That's what they do best. This idea goes sideways when non-analysts come to analysts and say, I need a BDI CDI, I need a segmentation study, right? I need these outputs. Because who's to know that those are the right keys to unlocking their challenge? Not them, certainly. They are not the analysts, they're not the data expert. It's the analyst who knows what those solutions do, how they can provide value. So recognizing that and keeping that state of mind is vitally important for the analysts to do the work they need to do for the organization to be successful, but also, frankly, in retaining that analyst. No analyst wants to work in a shop where they are just producing data widgets. No one wants to be an order taker, right? So you are in analytics because you like to ask questions, because you want to use your skill and the tools that you've acquired to solve problems and then communicate those things. So that idea of how the organization structures the relationship between analysts and non-analysts is tremendously important. The last thing that I know to be true of high-performing analytics teams is the dedication and support from the executive team. Having a sponsor, having the understanding throughout the organization of the value of analytics, how important it is, and also importantly, what kind of problems the analytics teams can solve and which ones they can't, right? And that just takes a basic understanding of analytics today. It's frankly what really motivated me to write the book I wrote. Certainly, I teach to that, and I use that to help analysts better understand their role and build skill. But more importantly for me was just to write a very accessible book for non-analysts to just gain a greater appreciation for what analytics is and how it can be applied. And so demonstrating that commitment and having that understanding is another key ingredient to a high-performing analytics team. So that's what it looks like, right? From the analyst to the analytics team to the cultural considerations and the way it really will function. Let's talk a little bit now about what it does. And what the analytics team does is unlock value from data, solves problems, right? I'm going to talk somewhat specifically about a marketing analytics team because that's just what we are. But really, analytics at its root is delivering solutions for any business. It doesn't matter if you are in a finance role, if you are in a healthcare organization, if you are in a nonprofit, even a government public sector organization. What you are doing is solving problems, right? So the way that we do this at Google is building a team that operates in these basic areas. And you see that over each area, it's been labeled as SMART. And that's because what the analytics team is doing is making the organization smarter. We are learning. From a marketing perspective, that involves us doing creative pre-testing. So any campaign that we are putting into market, we are reasonably sure that it's going to succeed because of the pre-testing and analytics that we have done on that campaign, on that concept. We are ensuring that the media plan that we have built is going to be successful based on the fact that it reflects things we have learned, the things that we know media needs, a campaign requires to be successful. We are using a tremendous amount of data and a tremendous amount of automation, frankly, to optimize our campaigns when they're in market. These are things that the analysts are building and then getting out of the way, right? We're not putting a human between many of these decisions. It's up to the analyst to sort of monitor and ensure that the systems are working in the right way. We call this trust but verify, right? But that analytics team is instrumental in building that infrastructure and the tools that are required to help the organization perform really effectively. We are, just as any traditional analytics team would do, we are building scorecards, we are doing post analysis, we are doing experiments because we have some hypotheses and there are things that we want to learn. You know, that's the smart lessons is probably the traditional idea of analytics. The power that we are bringing are all the other things that we're doing as well as an organization, and part of the reason why we are, frankly, at Google as successful as we are because of the investments we've made in analytics and the other areas. Finally, we are doing a great deal of machine learning powered analysis just to help us move massive amounts of data, find patterns and learnings from those things. So let's take another closer look at what these ideas really look like. The biggest challenge, the reason that we have built this sort of capability is said in the words here of my good friend Avinash Kaushik, who Avinash, if you don't know him, you really should. He is a huge thinker in this space, one of the godfathers of analytics and marketing data analysis. Avinash is now in his role at the center of the advertising that Google does ourselves when we are selling a device, when we are building more trust in our Google search platform, when we are advertising YouTube. It's Avinash who's making the decisions on how we are marketing as an organization, where we are investing. What Avinash found when he first moved into that role was we really had what I would call that smart lessons capability. We were doing all sorts of reporting. We were doing all sorts of experiments. The problem was that when we had those data in hand, money was already spent, right? We had already made the investments. So yeah, we could learn a little bit and then make better investments, but it was still a post hoc sort of analysis approach. He is the mind that built out the other capabilities to ensure that we could use data before, during, and after the campaign, just as we are doing, just as well as we did in the post analysis, to learn more, be more effective, and more efficient. To that end, we built a pre-testing process that there's no magic here. Any organization can do this. What really is the magic for us is what we do with the output and our dedication to this. And so one of the roles that analysts play and analytics is providing for us is this idea of what I'll call win before you spend. It means before we invest any money in our programs, in our marketing, we have a high degree of confidence that that program is going to work. And the reason we do that, or the reason we know that, is because of the testing that we have done. There's 4 steps to it. Before we launch an ad, we bring a panel in. We have a test and control group. In a lab situation where we can control everything, we set them at a desktop or a phone and we say, have some fun watching YouTube videos. For that test group, we're going to force an ad. For the control group, we're withholding. And then we're conducting a simple brand, what we call brand lift survey. Same kind of measurement that we would do and offer to anyone who is advertising on YouTube to see if we have driven awareness, consideration, intent, right? These sorts of ideas that are critical for any marketing function. That's how we're understanding if these ads are really achieving the objectives that we have or not, right? Is by that kind of survey approach. It's a very straightforward, simple test. We are then later on force viewing an ad to our panel, whether they're in test or control. Once they get home and they're out in the wild, next time they are on YouTube, we're going to force a view of that ad and then ask them some further questions. So just to build more texture into our understanding. This is where we might ask more brand attributes. We might ensure that that ad was scoring high on trustworthiness. Trust is so important for us at Google. If people don't trust us, they're not going to come and search at our platform. They're not going to come to YouTube to watch videos. And so that's what we really need, is that sort of engagement. So we're doing all this testing in survey ways that are really not unique to Google. Anyone could do this, right? But the way that then we are leveraging those learnings is where our magic comes in. And we have built a set of norms and guidelines based on our experience that allow us to now know scores that come out of our testing will either ensure that an ad is going to succeed or not, right? And we've built this understanding over time in the data that we've collected. We continue to test it as well to ensure that the thresholds we've identified are going to be successful. And so we'll have ads say score 74. We know that that's going to work. Run it. That ad is going to get us the lift in awareness or consideration or whatever the objective was. And we're confident that we can go forward with it. We also have a floor. A score of 36 doesn't meet it, right? We know that that ad is not going to be successful. We got to scrap that idea. Then there's this middle band of scores that we know with a little love, a little attention, we could probably recut that ad and save that concept and turn it from one that is going to perform somewhat poorly to one that will be successful. And that's also a role of the analyst to really understand where engagement fell off, what the ad did well, what it did not do well, right? So this kind of analysis of the campaigns, the ads are important. We are also building accountability. So reporting is still a vital function for our analysts. And the way that we do that to ensure that this system is used is through a very transparent report that ensures accountability. There is no threshold for us that says, if you have a campaign of this size, it must go through creative testing. Rather, we have built a system of reporting and accountability that puts that on the decision maker. And their boss, our CMO, receives a report with their name on it that says what percent of investment they were responsible for was tested, what percent of it was tested before the campaign launched, what percent passed that creative, and what percent didn't, right? And other important information. What we have learned, and this is not unique to us either, is that when a vice president has a report go to their boss, they really hate it when there are red numbers next to their name, right? So we shift the accountability, the decision making on that vice president. They don't have to test their ads. They don't have to put this through the process, the analytics process we built that we know works, but if they don't, they will have some questions that they need to answer, right? And that idea of building in accountability is so vital to any organization, but a very vital functional role of analytics. We are also testing a great deal. When we have a budget, 70% of our budget is put towards those ads that we know will succeed. We withhold 30% of our media budget to test things. That might be ad sequencing. It might be the power of different creative best practices, whatever those things are, right? We will use it to test those thresholds. Again, if we have an ad that scored just below the threshold, we'll say, well, maybe we'll put a little weight against that and see if 74 is indeed what we need to score. Maybe 72 works for this campaign, right? So we will test those things as well. And then there's always, as I said, a great amount of in-flight optimization and automation that we are monitoring and using as well. At the end of the day, we are driving toward some reporting and measurement that's vital for our organization to understand what succeeds and what doesn't, and for us to know if these campaigns were really successful. The way we do that is through incrementality testing. It is the gold standard for any measurement solution, and it has to be designed correctly. Far too often I've seen organizations run tests that are not designed well, and it just invalidates the results. When you design an incrementality study, when that incrementality study, which in a marketing sense is going to answer the question, what is the effect of this ad in triggering behaviors that would not have happened if we didn't run the ad, right? It separates for us those consumers who would have bought something anyways from those that were truly swayed by the ad they saw. And the way you do that is by first off designing a large enough sample that you will get statistically significant results. When you build a test and control group, you can never assure that those groups are going to behave in the same exact way. It's impossible. It's a fool's errand. What we do is we design those test and control groups randomly, and then we develop over a pre-test period an understanding of how those two behave. So say we're tracking purchase. We will find the purchase rate of the control group and then a factor that allows us to equate that purchase rate to the test rate. They are never going to purchase at the same rate, right? So we're not looking for two groups that are behaving exactly identically. We are looking for that factor, that understanding that allows us to equate the two groups together. Because then, once we enter our test period and we have the ad in market, we will have a control group who is not going to see the ad, and we are going to watch their purchase behavior while that ad is running, that campaign is going. What that allows us to do then is build what we call the counterfactual, which that counterfactual takes the factor that we found in the pretest period and applies it to the control group's observed behavior. And that counterfactual then represents the behavior that we would expect to see from the test group if we didn't show them an ad, right? This is the same way that they behaved relative to the control group in the pretest period. That's the counterfactual. So then when we observe actual purchase behavior, we know that the real true incrementality difference, that impact of the ad, is the difference between the counterfactual and the observed behavior. That's the true way to measure this. I've seen too many organizations say, well, we got a test and control group, let's go and let's see how they behave differently, and the difference is going to be our impact. That's not true. That's not how it works. You need that pre-test period. You need a factor. Sometimes the test group doesn't purchase as much as a control group. Sometimes it'll never purchase as much. So even when you see just a little bit of a bump, that could be the only effect that you could really hope to get. But by approaching it in this way and having analysts who are smart enough to understand these concepts and design in the right way, builds these studies appropriately. We are also, as I said, we are leaning way into machine learning and using that as a way to make sense of massive amounts of data. I mean, we are literally collecting billions of search queries every single day, billions of videos watched and consumer engagements. And so some of the patterns that are buried in those data would be impossible for the analysts to see alone, unaided. So we're letting computers do a lot of that work for us, the machines, right? And what that requires is having an analyst who can build these algorithms, train them, and interpret them appropriately, and then communicate that out, right? It really takes the techie, the business strategist, and that data designer skill in really probably the highest and best use of the analyst today. So there's a couple things then that analytics team is doing, and providing in terms of value. Again, this is more from a marketing perspective, but it doesn't really matter. Wherever that analyst is, whatever that team, whatever model it's adopted, whatever the culture is, if it is performing well, it is doing these things for the organization. It's pointing it towards growth. It's keeping it focused on those performance measures that do matter. And it does that by discerning between things that are driving performance and things that are not. It helps us understand better the signals of success. Things like the murky world of customer behavior, things like what the organization wants and needs, profit and lifetime value. It is allowing us to modernize our measurement tools by having a keen understanding of what is cutting edge, what is best practice in the measurement space, and ensuring that our approaches are there. It is using historical reports, predictive analyses, experiment-based approaches to really get toward true insight into the, in our case, the incremental effect of our ads, and answering really important questions for our organization. And ultimately, what it is doing is supporting the intuition of our business decision makers. It is not giving them a roadmap. Look, measurement, data, none of this is ever perfect, and that's not the intent, right? Our intent is to provide enough insight so that someone with some intuition can make a better decision. Given all the caveats, given the data limitations, given the challenges that we might have faced in securing the data, for us as the analysts, it's just, it's vitally important for us to understand those limitations and build solutions that, given our situation, do the best that they can. So thank you. I think we are right on time. How about that? And I know that we've got some time for questions. So I will go ahead and stop my screen share, I believe, and turn it back over to Kate, I think, just to direct some of the questions for us.
Well, I will be the one taking over. Yeah, thank you so much.
Right.
First of all, thank you so much, Professor Hartman, for this very informative and educational presentation. It was a great opportunity to have you present for the IVY Exec audience. And as you mentioned, we did receive a couple of questions. So I will just be starting off with the first question. It says, is the hybrid model where an analyst would belong to the centralized analytics team's cost center, but they would be assigned to working with a specific department or a project?
Typically, yes. I mean, they would certainly, it all depends, right? That's not a great answer, but you as an organization have great flexibility in how you actually design that. You can keep those analysts in a pool and then sort of loan them out, if you will, against specific needs of the organization, or you can keep them dedicated to lines of business. In my experience, it is better in that model when the analyst is dedicated to a line of business. When I've had to effectively pool and then loan out analysts, it's sort of like sharing a baby. No one ever feels like they get enough time with that analyst. But when they know that that analyst is devoted and dedicated to their business, then they know they can rely on them. And that idea of building reliance and building trust is really important. So there are ways that you can structure it. But typically, and from a cost center perspective, typically the best way to do that as well is to align the analyst to a centralized analytics cost center, but then devote them to a line of business so that they can build trust and reliance.
Okay, thank you. The next question says, are there any specific HR analytics tools for that you would recommend?
The short answer is no. And I think that's because, like, I am always tool agnostic. You know, I want to know more specifically, what is the problem I want to solve, right? What is it that I'm looking to achieve with the tool that I'm utilizing. And there are so many tools in the marketplace that a quick audit of those can reveal the tools that will fit those needs. Again, at the end of the day, that's just a tool. What's really important is the analysts that you have around that tool to build it, to maintain it, to interpret it, to utilize it in the right way. So while there's no specific tools that I would recommend, I would say that with so many tools in the marketplace, a quick audit for yourself to meet your own needs is the appropriate next step. But ensuring that you have enough analysts around that tool to make the whole process go and system work.
Thank you. And speaking of tools, the next question says how to change the mindset of the leaders that tools are not producing the insight by the people when scaling up without an analyst.
Yeah, look, that is, as I said at the beginning, that is a leadership challenge. So what that requires is a decision maker, someone who can make things happen for the organization, believing in the power of analytics and investing. That's the first step, right? You need the analyst to prove the value of analysts. So that first step is getting an executive sponsor, ensuring that the chief executive officer, that C-suite understands the need for this capability and investing in that talent, right? From there, it's all on the analyst. That's a big challenge, but it comes with the territory. What that analyst needs to be able to do is demonstrate how they bring value beyond what a tool can produce, right? And in my experience, I always put the onus on us as the analyst team to solve problems for others and to sort of almost, this is a bad word, but almost train them in a way, right? To ensure that they understand that I solve problems for you. You bring me my problems, your problems, I will solve them for you, right? So that's how we start to ensure, again, reliance and trust, but also further investment in the analytics capability. So it begins with leadership, and leadership making the decision that they are going to be demonstrably dedicated to analytics, and then it falls on the analyst to really prove their value. And those are the two steps to really unlocking that whole challenge.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we have another HR question. Working in people's ops, HR with access to very sensitive data, how do you handle confidentiality with a hybrid analytics structure?
Oh, I mean, look, the analyst is no different from any other employee of the organization, right? We all have a code of ethics. We all are under the same moral obligations to the organization. I wouldn't handle the analyst any differently than any HR representative or professional who has access to those data. I'd have them under the same sort of ideals and ethical commitments, right? But, you know, look, we have very sensitive data from a search perspective. No one outside of a few engineers could ever tie your specific search data back to you. Right? That's not how we operate. We don't see names, right? And so there are ways to anonymize those data, and just like through any kind of data management, prevent sensitive data from becoming too exposed, right? So you can build processes and approaches to, again, anonymizing, withholding some of those very sensitive data. But that doesn't, even in those processes, we still carry the expectation of great confidentiality, ethical considerations, and expectations with our analysts.
Thank you. And okay, we have a member of the audience that is looking to switch to tech industry and is very interested in the field you specialized in. So her question is, what advice do you have for a current business analyst learning to code for the first time?
Yeah, learning to code for the first time. So if you're building out those techie skills, I would say that you can really think of the tools that you are assessing in terms of how easy they are for you to use and how powerful they are. And what you want to find are those tools that are powerful for sure and somewhat easy to use, right? Like if you are moving into the analytics space for the first time, a tool like Tableau, which has a free version. If your organization invests in Power BI, something like that, something that can do a great deal of analytics for you and visualizing data that helps you both find patterns and communicate those patterns. That's where I would start. If you're thinking about coding specifically in a language, oh man, there's so many ways to learn. I would start with SQL, right? And just get the basic understanding of what it means to query a relational database or other languages that will work with what we call NoSQL now as well, and data lakes. But I would begin with some kind of basic understanding of an advanced tool like that that helps you analyze massive amounts of data. And what that idea of querying a data set becomes really transferable, and you start to see similarities between a tool, a language like SQL, and a language like R, right? You would also want to definitely understand the use of R or Python. Doesn't matter which. They both do just about the same. Python has become this hot new thing that everyone is all giddy about, but R, I know R. R is a fantastic tool. The advice I would give there is, look, at the end of the day, these are languages, right? And so if you are going to move to Germany, you're going to learn German, right? Not Spanish. I would think about this place I want to go work for, this industry that I want to work in. Do they typically use R or Python, right? And then I would start preparing myself by learning that specific language. You will find that in more of the business analyst side, and particularly certainly marketing analytics, you use R. And more of the engineering side and even some of the more advanced machine learning approaches, Python probably is more common. But regardless, I would just find out which language will enable you better and then learn it. And you can do that through any number of tools or platforms. We in our program we teach tools. So there are so many opportunities for you to learn now once you've made the decision of which tool you want to go out and equip yourself with.
Thank you. And we have time for two more questions. The first one being, we mentioned skill. Some people can naturally see and visualize data patterns. Can that gift be acquired?
Yes. And I don't, I would say people have just innate abilities to communicate. I get it, right? I mean, how comfortable you are in front of people, how charismatic you are, like all that stuff matters. But at the end of the day, the way we communicate with data is a series of guidelines that are learned. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so proud of the course that we teach, because we teach that. I just don't see the idea of how you communicate with data taught well enough. What I see are a lot of opportunities for people to learn tools and how to use Tableau or Power BI or anything else to visualize data. But what I rarely see is anyone teaching how you visualize that data correctly, right? And that is nothing but a learned set of skill. There's a couple names that I would throw out that could help you there too. There's a guy called Scott Marinato who led data visualization at Harvard Business Review for a long time. He's written some good books on it. There's a woman named Donna Wong who was head of visualization for the Wall Street Journal for a long time. She has a tremendously valuable guidebook on what good visualization looks like and what it doesn't. And then I spend, in my book, I spend quite a bit of time getting into that idea of what makes for good visualization and how you communicate effectively. So these are nothing but learned skills. Even though there are certainly some innate capabilities that will help you be a better communicator, you can still, if you have none of them, you can learn how to correctly communicate with data through these learned skills.
Thank you. And the last question would be, where is the best place to start for a small marketing team that has limited resources to put toward marketing analytics? And how can a small team bootstrap a more robust analytics function?
Yeah, hire an analyst. And if you already have one, hire a second one and point them toward free tools, SQL, R, Python, and start with have them tackle challenges that you can articulate and test your hypotheses, right? So identify the challenges that you want someone working on, have a hypothesis that they can test, and then turn them loose, right? That's where you start. And you will get more value by then asking more questions, learning more and more and more. And just as I said, that first question that they go out and solve, there will be 10 other questions that pop up, and that's how it works, right? So I would say, regardless of your resources, regardless of your ability, how large you are, starting there with an analyst equipped with free tools that is answering a question that you've got and testing your hypothesis is the right way to start. And then you can just sort of build from there.
Well, once again, thank you so much, Professor Hartman, for this wonderful session and time and the opportunity to present for our IVExec audience. We truly enjoyed it. And I would also like to thank you all for joining us today. As previously mentioned, we'll make sure to share the recording of the webinar in the coming days, so you can look forward to it in your mailboxes. And I'll just say this, I wish you all a great rest of the day and stay safe.
Thank you all.